what were the exact targets inside in Iran when these Israelis airstrikes were carried out?
The choice of target depends upon the quality of intelligence that the Israelis had. So basically, the choice of target in Iran by the Israeli military leadership represents Israeli desire to harm and affect the response options of Iran.
What do you think of these both candidates, Kamala and Mr. Trump, accusing each other on Middle East situation?
So you see two contrasting worldviews in the Republican and Democrat camps. And I think this presidential campaign will have very significant and far-reaching impact, not just on the U.S. foreign and defense policy, but for international peace and security.
How hopeful you are in next few days? Do you see return of peace in the Middle East as a result of these all multiple activities and efforts behind the scene?
Unfortunately, the last 50-century-old history of Middle East has always been turbulent. It is the place where three of the greatest religions have emerged, but it has also seen more conflict in the last 50 years than perhaps any other region in the world.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello and welcome to program Insight in V News English. Dear viewers, when we talk of Middle East, there is a new development, and that new development is that finally Israel carried out airstrikes against Iran. So according to initial report, 20 different type of sites have been targeted through Israeli airstrikes, which have been carried from Iraqi territory. And after these particular strikes, what is situation in Iran? What exactly were the targets inside in Iran? And after that, what will be now the Iranian strategy to hit back or to retaliate? So in addition to this, what are the available options with Iran? Number one, UN Security Council is also meeting. And in addition to this, Pakistan has also strongly condemned Israeli airstrikes against Iran and expressed strong solidarity with Iran. Pakistan also condemned and these attacks and said these Israeli attacks against Iran are clear violation of UN Charter, international law, and blatant violation of Iranian sovereignty. In the same backdrop, Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Shahbaz Sharif, is also undertaking an urgent visit to Gulf countries, mainly to Saudi Arabia. And after his official visit to Saudi Arabia, he will also be touching state of Qatar, where he is scheduled to have important meetings. To discuss these all latest developments, we are fortunate to have with us Senior International Affairs and Strategic Affairs Analyst, Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali Sahab. Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali Sahab, very warm welcome and Assalamu alaikum and very good evening.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you for having me, Mutin Saab.
Dr. Saab, this is the latest escalation in the Middle East. Finally, Israel has come close to Pakistan's border. When we say Pakistan's neighbor, Iran has finally been targeted by Israel. And would you like to first share details for our international viewers that what were the exact targets inside in Iran when these Israelis airstrikes were carried out?
Thank you for having me, Mutin Saab. Before we analyze the nature of airstrike that Israel has carried out and the sort of targets that it chose, I think I'm reminded of a very famous and historic words of the founder of Pakistan, Syed Muhammad Ali Jinnah, when he first visited Pakistan's Air Force Academy, Risalpur. He said two things which I think are very relevant to the subject that we'll discuss today. He said that any country without a strong air force is at the mercy of an aggressor.
True.
And secondly, Pakistan must build an air force second to none.
Second to.
So if you look at the world history of conflicts from 1945, from Second World War till today, I think all the victims of conflict are basically those countries which do not have a powerful and strong and efficient air force. You look at Iraq, you look at Libya, you look at Syria,
even
Lebanon, you look at Afghanistan, and we will try to understand the context of this statement regarding Iran as well. So when we talk about Israeli air attack of Iranian military installations, there are three aspects which are worth considering. First, the diplomatic effort. Second, the intelligence aspect. And the third is the military aspect. Regarding the diplomatic aspect, it is very important to highlight that the US presidential campaign also involved very serious and high-level discourse and perspectives regarding these strikes. And you would recall that President Biden mentioned that the Israelis should not target the nuclear and oil sites, whereas former President Trump accused Biden administration of being weak and recommended to the Israeli leadership that they should target the Iranian nuclear facilities. So this indicates even the US elections are giving due importance to the current tensions in the Middle East. However, according to informed reports, the highest level US defense officials advised the Israeli military leadership that they should avoid targeting the oil and nuclear facilities, because that would perhaps lead to a cycle of escalation which will not be possible to control and manage by Israel and US. So the nature and the types of targets that Israel chose reflects that this US advice has been accepted, and the selection of target represents that only military targets were chosen and attacked. The second aspect is the intelligence aspect, which is very important, that although much attention is given to the kinetic aspect of the air attack, but it is very important to know that the choice of target depends upon the quality of intelligence that the Israelis had about what sort of sites are there and how significant damage to those facilities will affect Iranian response options. So basically, the choice of target in Iran by the Israeli military leadership represents Israeli desire to harm and affect the response options of Iran. That is the specific context. Now, there are three types of targets which have been attacked, and the attack was carried out in three waves. The first wave of the Israeli fighters were basically carrying out a seed mission, which is called suppression of enemy air defenses, which aims to blind the radars of Iranian air defense system and take out their surface-to-air missile sites. And according to the Iranian accounts as well, those officers who have lost their lives in this attack also belong to the Iranian air defense forces, which is an evidence that the Iranian air defense sites were attacked in the first wave in order to reduce Iran's ability to shoot down the Israeli fighters. The second wave targeted the missile assembly plants of Iran, where the solid propellant fuel of the ballistic and cruise missile is prepared. And that is very critical, because if that site has been significantly damaged, in the months and years to come, it will be very difficult for Iran to mass produce its cruise and ballistic missiles if its solid fuel manufacturing capacity has been seriously dented. The third target it was the drone factory in Tehran suburbs, because these two targets also represent that the Israeli leadership wanted to please the Americans and Ukrainians at the same time, because the choice of attacking an Iranian drone factory will also affect Iranian ability not only to carry out a strong retaliation against Israel, but also affect its ability to provide drones to Hezbollah, Houthis, and also its ability to sell these to Russia, which have been using the Iranian Shahid drone against Ukraine. So I think this choice of target indicates the Israeli strategic objective of not just significantly reducing the Iranian response capability, but also affecting its ability to help and sustain Russian war effort on the Ukrainian front as well.
Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali, sir, you spoke in depth about these different aspects. Before we ask you certain other military and diplomatic angles, please enlighten our international viewers now, after this particular attack, what are the options with Iran now? Political, diplomatic, and military, please.
Thank you so much. I think already the reaction from Iran needs to be understood comprehensively across 4 domains. It's public sentiment. What is the Iranian media saying? What is its ideological and political leadership saying? What is its military leadership saying? And what is the reaction of its diplomats? The first reaction came from the Iranian foreign minister, who emphasized that Iran has a right of self-defense. That indicates invoking the UN Charter in order to maximize the response option and build diplomatic support and space for a retaliatory option, in diplomatic words. The second response you can look at in terms of the public sentiment in Iran. You look at the Iranian media. I think the public sentiment was not that of very strong anger and hatred in the last 2 days. And most of the visuals that you saw on Iranian media indicated that the life is normal and it is not significantly affected, which means that Iranian media wanted to give a sense to the outside world that not much harm has been caused and there is no large-scale destruction and the life goes on normally. And some parts of the Iranian media also played down the damage or the significant harm that this Israeli attack posed to them. When you look at the political leadership's response, I think it was calculated and very tactful. When we hear the statement of Ayatollah Khamenei, he said the Israeli attack should neither be overestimated nor overlooked, which indicates that they will consider options. He met the war cabinet and discussed it. But according to latest reports, perhaps a final decision regarding the choice of target has so far not been decided, although consultations are in process. The fourth and more recent reaction was from the commander of IRGC, the Pasdaran Inqilab, who has promised a strong response in the days to come, stopping short of explaining the nature and type of that reaction. So when you add all these 4 reactions, it indicates there is a desire from Iranian political and military leadership to respond, stopping short of escalating the conflict so much that they are not able to manage the conflict at the same time. So there is a desire to for a proportionate and calculated response, short of provoking Israel for a further escalatory cycle of conflict.
Professor, if we look into the over past 3-4 months developments, including the assassination of Ismail Hania, then assassination of Syed Hassan Nasrallah, then when Israel carried out attacks on Lebanon, Pakistan strongly condemned it. Usually, when we see into the international affairs or international angles, Pakistan is usually found in the American camp, but it was very strong statement that came from Pakistani Foreign Office, strongly condemning Israeli airstrikes against Iran and terming these airstrikes as blatant violation of international law, UN Charter, Iranian territorial and Iranian territory, and Iranian sovereignty. So, how you make of this Pakistani statement? Pakistan also said that these attacks poses greater regional threats. Really, these attacks really posed a greater regional threat. Do you think that there could be escalation of tension or greater threat after this particular attack? And the statement made by Pakistani Foreign Office, followed by a statement by Pakistani Prime Minister, Mr. Shahbaz Sharif.
Mateen Sahab, I think Pakistani diplomatic reaction to the Israeli air attack against Iran was definitely very strongly worded, and but I think it needs to be seen in the. But I think it needs to be seen in three contexts. First, I think the general reaction, even from the Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, even Turkey, also was based on condemnation of the attack and the risk of further escalation. However, in case of Pakistan, I agree with you. It not only was strongly worded and based on strong condemnation of Israeli attack, but it also put responsibility of escalation on Israel and described it as a violation of UN Charter and international laws. But I think this is based on the principled position that Pakistan always upholds. And you know, we are currently non-permanent member of the UN Security Council as well. So I think Pakistan is conscious of its responsibility to uphold international law, UN Charter and principles, and encourage the international community to adhere it and condemn all unilateral or mutual violations of it. So that is not surprising. However, I would like to add one more context, which is very interesting. While this tension was going on, there were reports of a joint naval military exercise between Iran and Saudi Arabia as well, which was held a few days ago.
Naval exercise.
Yes. And secondly, I think it was also very important that while Pakistan issued a very strong diplomatic reaction against Israeli air attack of Iran, Pakistan Air Force at the same time is holding a large multinational air power exercise in Pakistan, where according to reports, almost 24 countries are participating. And the main countries include Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and a large number of observers from different countries. And more recently, Pakistan also held bilateral naval exercises with the US Navy last week. So if you add it up, so that represents a very careful multilateral diplomatic and strategic behavior of Pakistan, that Pakistan is very careful in managing and navigating its relations at bilateral and multilateral level with regional and global powers without taking side of any particular, center of power. However, when it comes to, taking a strong principled and legal stance, we are unambiguous and consistent in the condemnation of all unilateral violations of international law and UN Charter, which was evident in Pakistan's strong condemnation. But I think another very important development, which you also mentioned earlier, is Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's quick visit to Middle East, and he's likely to visit Qatar, and he's also expected to visit Saudi Arabia. And if this visit is taking place before a possible Iranian response to the Israeli attack, I think its timing is very significant and indicates that the Saudi and Qatari leadership would like to consult Pakistani leadership regarding its implications, and in case the escalation further increases, then how can we shape a mutually well-considered approach to manage this crisis and diffuse it. And just to add one last point, that you are aware, some diplomatic efforts are afoot, and a proposal has been given by Egypt regarding exchange of prisoners between Hamas and Israel. But it remains to be seen. Some high-level visitors from Israel and US are expected to visit Doha very soon. So there is some very hectic and timely crisis diplomacy going on in the Middle East right now. And it is very important that hopefully it will yield timely results and diffuse the crisis before it escalates into a conflict which affects everybody.
Dr. Saab, although Pakistan is not directly into the Middle Eastern conflict, but Pakistan's certain strategic defense capabilities has long been in the Israeli radar. So in the greater context, do you think Pakistan is in the near future will be safe from any further escalation of the tensions which we are witnessing now, and Pakistan's overall strategic defense capabilities are out of the current radar?
I think your question reminds me of the first comment that I made on your program tonight, that I think one of the biggest lessons of this entire crisis is that any country without a strong air force is at the mercy of its of any aggressor. These are profound, timeless words of our great founder, Syed Muhammad Ali Jinnah, which we have witnessed in the last 70 or 80 years. Secondly, I think no matter how principled or moral or sincere you are, you need to be strong and self-sufficient in your defense capability. That is also a bitter lesson from history. Third is that when it comes to specifically its implications for Pakistan, a few domain relevant implications are already evident. First is definitely Pakistan's energy security is directly linked with its relations with the Middle East, because Pakistan is heavily dependent upon oil and gas imports from the Middle East. Our national energy mix is such that during winter months, which are arriving shortly, the water quantity declines in our water reservoirs and dams, and the gas consumption increases, and we become more dependent on gas imports from the Middle East. So in case of this crisis further escalating, it could affect not just the supply, but also the pricing of energy supplies from the Middle East, which could affect not just our energy security, but also harm our balance of trade as well, which we are trying to address. Secondly, a large number of Pakistanis, you are aware, are working in the Middle East, who provide a sustainable and significant source of foreign remittances to Pakistan. And in case of a major crisis, one hopes that that is not likely to be affected. And the third aspect is that Pakistan's track record in case of any Middle Eastern crisis has been that we have always led a multilateral diplomatic effort aimed at diffusing and managing it. And one hopes that Pakistani Prime Minister's visit to Middle East can also make a substantive and timely contribution towards the peace efforts and managing and diffusing this crisis, because it will affect not just the region, but the entire international community as well.
Dr. Last, when Ismail Hania was assassinated inside in Iran, it was also a blatant violation of Iranian sovereignty. And immediately after that, an urgent meeting of the Executive Committee of Organization of Islamic Conference was called. Now, while we are discussing, after a while, there might be UN Security Council meeting that has specially been convened to discuss this Israeli attack on Iran. What possibly Security Council can say on this? Will it condemn? And it is the biggest and most important decision-making body of the United Nations. Dr.
I think there are two aspects to understanding the possible role and significance of the UN Security Council meeting. I think it is partly related to the crisis diplomacy currently afoot in Middle East, which also involves the US, which involves Qatar, which involves Egypt, in order to convince and persuade both Israel and Hamas to come to some sort of mediation. And according to recent statements from the Hamas representative currently present in Qatar, he has said that they are willing to consider ceasefire terms and conditions. But in contrast, I think it is Israel which seems reluctant to accept Hamas demands, because they believe, for both domestic and geopolitical reasons, they have successfully, weakened Hamas and Hezbollah, and they want to achieve victory, which means they want to destroy Hamas and Hezbollah rather than trying to agree to their demands. So I think that is a delicate balancing act, and perhaps the U.S. Role will be significant if it can persuade Israel to accept a ceasefire in return for exchange of prisoners. But I think Iran and Hezbollah will also consider and look very closely how this crisis diplomacy, pans out in the days to come. However, when it comes to UN Security Council, I think US, France, and Britain are firmly supporting Israel, both diplomatically and militarily. And this attack by Israel against Iran was also, in so many words, described as a Israeli right of self-defense rather than an unilateral aggression against another sovereign member of the UN. So that is how I see it. In contrast, I would expect Russia and China to be more demanding in terms of a timely ceasefire of the conflict and urging reduction in the escalation. But I think the prospects and chances of a consensus ceasefire demand by all permanent members of UN Security Councils are remote.
Dr. Now seeking your very, very valuable analysis on an American election campaign, where this Middle East crisis is also under focus. And Republican candidate Trump is accusing the Democrats that, look, if the Republicans have been in power, this situation would have been different. Although Republicans are very close to Israel as well. So how you make of this Middle East, which is also one of the key subject, one of the key topic in the US election? And what do you think of these both candidates, Kamala and Mr. Trump, accusing each other on Middle East situation?
I think I followed the U.S. politics for almost last 40 years. And I think most of the times, in most of the presidential elections, the greatest focus is mostly on the domestic issues. But this particular campaign is somewhat different, because I think the foreign and defense policy issues are also significantly figuring in the current presidential campaigns. And they are very contrasting as well. I think in terms of Mr. Trump and Republican stance, it is a totally different ideology and worldview towards the U.S. foreign policy and defense policy. And Mr. Trump has been unambiguous in terms of his complete and unqualified support for Israel. Mr. Trump moved, he was the first U.S. president to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And, his own brother, his own son-in-law is Jewish, Jared Kushner. He has been very active in the Middle East. And thirdly, I expect that he would provide much greater diplomatic, economic, and military support to Israel, and reduce the diplomatic, economic, and military support for Ukraine, which has caused concern in the Western Europe, because they view the prospect of Mr. Trump returning to White House as a declining U.S. security commitment towards Western Europe against Russia. So I think that's why the return of Trump is seen favorably both in Tel Aviv and Moscow. Whereas in case of the Democrats, they want to have a more delicate balancing act, because despite their significant support throughout the last year's long conflict of Israel, they have been making diplomatic overtures in order to pacify the Arab street sentiment, and also woo the non-white, non-Christian voters in the US. And Kamala Harris is also likely to talk to some Muslims and Arabs in order to get their votes as well. And they also want to balance their support for Israel with maintaining some sort of goodwill with the Arab countries, but also sustaining the war effort of Ukraine against Russia, but confronting China more aggressively in South China Sea. So you see two contrasting worldviews in the Republican and Democrat camps. And I think this presidential campaign will have very significant and far-reaching impact, not just on the U.S. foreign and defense policy, but for international peace and security.
Sir, finally, I would like to seek your comment for international audience that what is way forward? You spoke about so many hectic activities, diplomatic, military, Israeli, American intelligence officials coming in Qatar, background diplomacy and negotiations between Hamas and Israel, and Egypt is involved, prime minister's visit. How hopeful you are in next few days? Do you see return of peace in the Middle East as a result of these all multiple activities and efforts behind the scene?
My short answer would be that, unfortunately, the last 50-century-old history of Middle East has always been turbulent. It is the sort of place where three of the greatest religions have emerged, but it has also seen more conflict in the last 50 years than perhaps any other region in the world. And I see that perhaps instead of complete peace, I fear that we'll continue to see, more of a chaos and instability continuing to linger in the Middle East, because on one side, Israel seeks hegemony and regional dominance. And from the Israeli perspective, the peace would mean Israeli hegemony and dominance. Whereas whenever and whoever, whether it's an entity or a country, who desires to contain and challenge the Israeli hegemony and dominance, the natural consequence would be conflict and chaos, which I think is unlikely to impede unless Israel completely vanquishes all those entities, organizations which are opposing its reign of terror in Lebanon and Palestine, which is highly unlikely.
Thank you so much indeed, Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali Saab. Despite your very, very busy schedule, your discussion and thoughts have been extremely insightful on the current Middle East tension in the wake of Israeli airstrikes against Iran. And very precisely, you have highlighted military, diplomatic, and political angles. I hope for our international audience, it will be extremely informative and useful. Once again, Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali Saab, we are grateful to you for your time that you spoke to Program Insight in Videos English. And dear viewers, till our next program, Allah Hafiz and goodbye from studios.
Thank you.